All of these people here to celebrate the 2011 NBA champions.
You won't believe where all the 2011 Dallas Mavericks players ended up. Have you ever randomly wondered whatever happened to some of the players that make up a championship team? Well, I know I have. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the 2011 Dallas Mavericks championship winning roster and where they all went after all that incredible success that season. Make sure you stick around until the end of the video to find out about some of the big-name players who were critical to that team's success. We'll start off with Alexis Ajinca. Ajinca was traded to the Dallas Mavericks at the beginning of this 2011 season alongside Tyson Chandler, another layer that we'll get into in a second. He spent about half of a season on their roster before getting traded mid-season to the Toronto Raptors. He finished the season out with them and didn't have any other NBA offers, so he joined the SIG Strasbourg in France. He spent 3 years there before making it back into the league, signing with the New Orleans Pelicans and remaining there for the next 5 years. He got traded and was waived immediately, which caused him to go back over to France and play for one more season before retiring. Next is JJ Barea. Barea was undrafted before landing with the Mavericks in 2006. Barea became the first ever Puerto Rican player to win an NBA championship, but he failed to re-sign with the team after that 2011 season due to a contract dispute. He ended up inking a 4-year deal with the Minnesota Timberwolves, where he stayed for a few years before eventually getting waived by that team. During the offseason, he was able to rejoin the Mavericks for a second stint and remained there all the way up until the 2020 NBA season, even though he never really got much playing time. More recently, he's played in multiple leagues outside of the US. Moving on to Rodrigue Beaubois. Right after the 2011 season, Beaubois underwent foot surgery for the second time and didn't get to play much that upcoming season. He did continue to play for 2 more years, but suffered so many injuries that they had to let him go. Afterwards, he bounced around a couple of different international leagues, including the Belgian League, the LNB Pro A season, the Euro League, and the Turkish Basketball Super League. He's reportedly still on a roster out there and is playing to this day. Then we have Corey Brewer. Brewer was traded to the Denver Nuggets the offseason after they won the NBA championship. He spent 2 mediocre seasons with the team before leaving and inking a new 3-year deal with the Minnesota Timberwolves, a year in which he dropped 51 points in one game. Then afterwards, he was traded for the 3rd time in his career to the Houston Rockets. He stayed there for 3 years and even signed a 3-year extension, though he once again didn't get to play it all out. The Rockets flipped him over to the LA Lakers, a team that eventually waived him right after. Then he went to the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Philadelphia 76ers, and the Sacramento Kings before officially retiring from basketball and joining the New Orleans Pelicans as a player development coach. Next is Caron Butler. Butler got pretty lucky. He was traded to the Mavs at the start of this 2011 season and won the championship with them. He didn't get to play though because he underwent shoulder surgery and missed the entire postseason run. He left the team after that and signed with the LA Clippers for 3 years, playing 2 of them before getting traded to the Phoenix Suns, though a few days later he got traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. He played a year there and then went to the Oklahoma City Thunder, then the Detroit Pistons, and finally the Sacramento Kings before announcing his retirement. Nowadays, he's an assistant coach for the Miami Heat. Moving on to Brian Cardnell. Well, Cardnell honestly didn't do much after that championship run. At the end of the season, he signed a 1-year veteran minimum contract with the Mavs, and without playing much at all, he retired at the end of the season. Nowadays, it isn't really clear what he's doing for a living. Then we have the aforementioned Tyson Chandler. Chandler left the Mavericks immediately after their championship and signed with the New York Knicks for the next 3 years. He got traded back to the Mavericks at the end of those years and spent 1 more year there before leaving and signing a new massive deal with the Phoenix Suns. He played 3 out of his contracted 4 years with that organization before reaching a buyout after the Suns drafted DeAndre Ayton. Chandler spent about 1 season with the Los Angeles Lakers and another with the Houston Rockets after that. He hasn't officially announced retirement, but he hasn't played professional basketball since 2019. A quick reminder, make sure you guys stick around until the end of the video to find out about some of the players who were really the heart and soul of this championship roster. But first, we'll move on to Brendan Haywood. Haywood stayed with the Mavs for 1 more season after their championship victory, though he was eventually waived due to the amnesty clause. He was picked up by the Charlotte Bobcats for a year, but missed an entire season due to a stress fracture in his foot. After a year and a half of barely playing, he got traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers for one more year. He saw no action in a playoff run and got traded to the Portland Trail Blazers the middle of the next season, a team that waived him right away. Now, just like Chandler, Haywood hasn't officially retired either, but we haven't seen him play since Cleveland back in 2015. Next up, we've got Dominique Jones. Jones was assigned to the D-League by the Mavericks after the championship, and he played great there, but the Mavs didn't pick up his team option. He stayed with the D-League team for a little while before leaving the NBA entirely and joining the Chinese Basketball Association. He played for numerous teams out in China before going into the Iranian Super League for a year and then back to China. Now, for all we know, he could still be playing, but his basketball record stops after 2018. Moving on now to Jason Kidd. Kidd was nearing the end of his playing career, and after a championship victory, he didn't really have much left in him. The next season, he signed with the New York Knicks despite making a verbal agreement to stay with the Mavericks. Kidd was actually a starter that season, believe it or not, but he announced his retirement after getting burned out by starting in the regular season. He then coached for the Brooklyn Nets, where he was the head coach for a year, then became the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks for the next 4 years. After that, he took a break from head coaching and took a back seat with the Los Angeles Lakers for 2 years, and nowadays he's back in Dallas as the head coach of the Mavericks. Jan Mahinmi is next. Mahinmi left one season after that 2011 year, getting traded to the Indiana Pacers in exchange for Darren Collison and Dante Jones. He signed a new deal with the organization and stayed with them for 4 years that wound up being decent at best. He left in 2016 and signed a pretty substantial 4-year deal with the Washington Wizards, actually playing his entire contract out with that team before retiring with Washington right at the end of the contract in 2021. Then we have Shawn Marion. Marion stayed with Dallas until the end of the 2014 season. He was really starting to get up there in age at this time and was clearly struggling defensively and really even offensively from time to time. Nevertheless, he was still able to sign another 1-year deal after that with the Cleveland Cavs and broke a few milestones before retiring at the end of that season. He hasn't gotten into any coaching or international play since that moment either, just kind of living the retirement life. Next up, we have Steve Nowak. Now, Nowak was on the official roster looking back at it, but he really didn't have any impact with the team. He got released halfway through the season and went to the NBA Development League before bouncing around to different NBA teams. Among those stops were the San Antonio Spurs, the New York Knicks, the Toronto Raptors, the Utah Jazz, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and finally the Milwaukee Bucks. He announced his retirement after he got waived by Milwaukee and actually entered into the sports broadcasting field. He still commentates to this day for the Bucks NBA G League team, too. And we finally made it to one of the biggest names on that roster, Dirk Nowitzki. We wouldn't really have enough time in this video if we were going to talk about strictly his success and accolades for a certain team. Thankfully, this is just about where these players went in their careers after that 2011 season, and of course, Dirk didn't go anywhere, which makes this section pretty easy. He stayed with the Mavs all the way until the end of the 2018-2019 season when he officially retired. He was one of the few players in history who stayed with the team that they were drafted by their entire career, and he's a legend for players who strive to be loyal to an organization. Moving on to Sasha Pavlovic. Pavlovic was very similar to a lot of other players who were listed on the roster at some point in 2011 because he didn't last there long. He was there for just 20 days before the Mavericks opted not to sign him for the rest of the season. He flipped around from the Boston Celtics to the Portland Trail Blazers to the New Orleans Hornets and finally the Milwaukee Bucks before leaving the NBA entirely. He played for a little while overseas, but he was released by a team in 2016 and hasn't played professional basketball since then. Now we get into DeShawn Stevenson. Stevenson was definitely one of those players that didn't have much left in the tank after he put his all into that Mavericks championship run. He left after the season and joined the New Jersey Nets for a year before getting traded to the Atlanta Hawks. He was waived in 2013 and officially retired from the sport in 2016 after not really getting many more NBA offers. Peja Stojakovic is up next. Now, Stojakovic was a phenomenal basketball player, but by the time the 2011 season came to an end, he just didn't have much left in him either. He was hindered by ongoing back and neck injuries, and he mentioned that it was getting really hard to play basketball at all anymore. He retired literally after they won the trophy, and about 4 years later, he became a player development coach for the Sacramento Kings, and then he moved up to assistant general manager. He did step down recently, though, for an unknown reason. Last but not least, we've got Jason Terry. After winning a championship, he famously tattooed another championship trophy onto his bicep when he joined the Boston Celtics because he believed he would repeat as champ with the Celtics. Of course, to no surprise, they didn't win it that year, and he left to go join the Brooklyn Nets right after. Not because he wanted to, but because he got traded. He spent 1 year there before getting traded to the Houston Rockets, where he spent 2 more seasons. After that, he left the team and signed with the Milwaukee Bucks for the final 2 years of his career before retiring at the end of the 2018 NBA season. So there you have it. That's what's happened to every player on the 2011 Dallas Mavericks championship roster. They all went their different ways, and it was honestly surprising to see how many players just chose to retire shortly afterwards. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content just like it. And check out what happened to every player drafted above Dirk Nowitzki up next.